Okay, in this example, which is going to be very similar to the ones that we just did in the previous video, we're going to change from general form to vertex form. The only difference here is that you will notice that the x squared term has a coefficient other than 1. This is our leading coefficient, so that's the only difference here, and there's a special technique or a way that we're going to deal with that. Okay, so let's first start by changing this into y equals, like we've done before, 6x plus 2. Okay, so that step remains the same. Now, in order to do the complete the square, we've got to get rid of this 3. So you can divide by 3, or you can multiply by 1/3, however you like to think of it. And I'm going to show it in red, and I'm just going to show it dividing right now. If you divide one term, you have to divide all the terms. So I'm going to write y over 3 as 1/3 y, because I like that better. And then this first term, of course, 3 divided by 3 is 1, so that becomes x squared. The next term, 6 divided by 3 is 2, so that becomes 2x. And 2 divided by 3, we're going to resist the urge to change it to decimals, and we're going to leave it as fractions. And now the next step, we're going to subtract 2/3 from each side. So on the left-hand side, I've got 1/3 y minus 2/3. And then over on the right-hand side, I've got x squared plus 2x. So now I'm going to go get the coefficient of the x term, which is 2. And I'm going to take that over to the side. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and when we square the 1, of course, we get 1. So we want to add that 1 to both sides. So I have 1/3 y and a minus 2/3, and now I'm going to add 1 to this side, and on the right hand side, x squared plus 2x, and now I want to add 1 to the right hand side. Okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at the left hand side. I still have 1/3 y. Well, 1 minus 2/3, that's going to give me a positive 1/3. And the right hand side is ready to factor. So x squared square rooted becomes x. 1 square rooted is 1. Of course, that's quantity squared. And then now the next step, I want to subtract 1/3 from both sides. So I have 1/3 y on the left, and on the right I still have this x plus 1 quantity squared, but now I'm going to have a minus 1/3. Now we've got to deal with this coefficient here, this coefficient of the y, because we're not completed. So in order to get rid of that 1/3, we are either going to multiply through by 3, or you can divide by 1/3. Nobody likes to divide by fractions. So we're going to multiply through by 3. That means everybody, I'll just show it here a minute, everybody gets multiplied by 3. The whole side gets multiplied by 3. So let's see what that looks like when we do it. 3 times 1/3, well, that's just 1, which was the whole point. And then this 3 I'm just going to put right in front of that binomial. There we go. And then 3 times 1/3 is 1. And so now if I identify the vertex is -1, -1. And so we have found the vertex of this quadratic by doing complete the square, and the only difference was we had a coefficient of the x term, and we had to deal with that first. Okay, let me do another example, and just like last time, I'll run through it rather quickly, and let me go ahead and write it up here. a little different. It's got lots of cool fractions in it. So we got 1/3 x squared minus x plus 2. And again, why don't you pause me right now, see if you can work this one on your own. Resist the urge to change things into fractions. Go ahead and leave them as decimals, or leave them as fractions, I mean, and don't change them into decimals. And then when you get your paper worked, why don't you join me and see what you end up with for the vertex. Okay, so let's continue here. So the first thing we want to do is change this course into y equals. And we've got to get rid of that 1/3, so we're going to divide by 1/3 or multiply through by 3. That means everybody gets multiplied through by 3. So this becomes 3y. 3 times 1/3 is 1, so that gets rid of the coefficient of the x squared, which was the whole point. And this becomes 3x, and this becomes 6. And then we're going to subtract 6 from both sides. So the left-hand side becomes 3y minus 6, and the right-hand side becomes x squared minus 3x. Now we take the coefficient of the x term over to the side. It's -3. We're going to divide that by 2, and I'm just going to leave it just like that. And I'm not going to change it into a decimal. And I'm going to square that. And I end up with 9, because -3 squared is 9. 2 squared is 4. And in a second I'm going to show you exactly why I'm going to leave that as a fraction and not change it into a decimal. Okay, so now we're ready to add that to both sides. Change colors here. So we want to add that 9/4 to both sides. There we go. Now we are ready to go ahead and simplify a little bit. So -6 plus 9/4, that turns out to be negative, and that's 15/4. Now we're going to factor this. This is why I like to leave this as a fraction. Watch this. So, of course, x squared square rooted is x. We want to square root 9/4. Well, the square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 4 is 2. Okay. And this has a negative right here. Let me point that out to you in a different color. There's a negative right here. So in that case, this becomes negative. So there's an example of where this is negative. I think all our other examples have been positive. Okay. All right, so let's complete the problem. We're going to add 15/4 to both sides. 15/4. So now we've got 3y equals quantity x minus 3/2, quantity squared. Oops, look, I forgot to put my little squared up there. And then I have plus 15/4. Now, last step is I've got this 3 as a coefficient of my y term. I got to get rid of that. So we're going to divide by 3 or multiply through by 1/3. Some cases I like the dividing, sometimes I like the multiplying. So the left-hand side becomes y. I'm multiplying by 1/3, so I'm just going to put that 1/3 right there as the leading coefficient. And then I've got 15/4. Let's look at that over to the side. 15/4 times 1/3. And when you multiply that out, you see that 3 goes into 3 once. 3 goes into 15 5 times, so that becomes 5/4. And now I want to identify the vertex. I'll go ahead and write that up here. So the vertex in this case is 3/2 and 5/4. And that's that problem.